Hi, welcome to our luncheon. We're today going to be talking about the Anthropology Department's Field School. We are actually on the very front page of the Western Courier, so if you have questions, there's more information on there. My name is Rebecca McCollum. I am a senior. I'm an anthropology sociology double major, and I have minors in religious studies and psychology.
I'm Savannah. I'm a freshman. Um, I'm a chemistry major.
Hi, I'm Alexandra, and I got my undergrad here in forensic chemistry with an anthropology minor, and I'm currently here at Western Illinois University as a graduate chemistry student.
Hi, I'm Winston Littell. I'm an anthropology computer science double major, and I am a senior.
All four of us are up here talking about this today because a few years ago we actually attended the Anthropology Field School. So I've created this PowerPoint slide that will allow us to kind of walk through what the field school was like. And if you have questions, by all means, feel free to ask. So day one, everything you need has to be carried up. So this is actually at the bottom of the hill. The hill, and I use that term loosely, that we hiked up. My Fitbit told me it was 10 flights of stairs. So if you've ever seen Monk's Mound or have heard of Monk's Mound, it's the equivalent of hiking to the top of Monk's Mound. Then we would cross the field, which was a little longer than that. But so the cooler contains everybody's lunches. My Navy duffel bag here actually has a big 5-gallon water jug full of water because there is nothing. There's no facilities. If you don't bring it, you don't have it. Which makes you really prepare and think about what you're going to need for the day. And you wind up packing light because everything you have to hike up yourself. Again, we're continuing on up the hill. Some parts were a little more steeper than others. As you can see, the incline is kind of got a pretty good angle. Great leg workout. Definitely a phenomenal workout.
Get your cardio for the day.
The first day, I think we did 5 trips, bringing as much stuff up because everything we had, wheelbarrows, everything came up.
First day, the most exhausting day.
And it is. Mm-hmm. So we actually come up down over here and then wind our way around. And these are a couple of mounds that will not be dug on, at least not by us as students. But it's known that there are historical artifacts that are underneath there. But it's beautiful. What you can't see from here, if you were to look out over through here, is the Illinois River. So you go up this very high, tall bluff, which is perfect back then because it's very defensible. Anybody who's going to come towards you or try and attack you has got to come up that same height that we just took, and you're very high compared to where your water source is. So back then, it would have been a lot of carrying. So the only people who would have lived up there would have been those who were very wealthy, very powerful.
Also, the thing about that site is that not only can you see down and below, but you can see across very far. And unlike many parts of Illinois, it's actually fairly hilly. So you can see from like bluff to bluff, and it's actually very interesting to see. And to be like, on a clear day, what could you see? Could you see people? And then they use that for communication.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure if we would have had access to other bluffs that were there that we could see that had flatter areas, it would have been very easy to communicate back and forth through different methods. This was a very happy day. We walked through all this. You actually come in way back. Actually, it's over here. We brought this up empty, 65 gallons. Yep. And this was the day we filled it. The water that we put in here was actually used to keep the dig site wet because you don't want it to dry out or crack. So before you would shovel anything, you would want it to spray everything down. So when you dug, it's much easier with damp soil to do some digging than it is with rock hard baked ground.
It's also easier to identify features in the ground. Sometimes water highlights, the color differences in the soil that you wouldn't notice when the ground is dry and cracked.
As you can see, that's me, and there's Linda C. We were very happy. So all these gallon jugs every day, we would bring them up with us.
It was like 10 gallons a day, I think, because we brought the 5 up, and then we had to bring our drinking water, and then
Roughly 10 gallons or so a day we would bring up. Anything that wasn't used went into there, and that's what we used to fill our sprayers. We started off initially with only a couple of tents. We were able to get more as it went on, so we were able to cover more area. So you would
Yes, that's me.
So Linda C's got her shovel, and she's shovel scraping. It goes into a 5-gallon bucket, and then the bucket goes over to me, who is screening. And then this has got 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch wire mesh, and everything goes through it. When your wheelbarrow is full, it goes to the side and you dump it, rinse and repeat. The beginning, I think, for me, was more difficult. I'm not as young as some of the other people that came. So it was challenging, but it wasn't something that was impossible. I kept up with everybody else, even though I'm old enough to be everybody who came's parent. But we all had a great time, I think. Savannah, you were between your junior and senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think why I did it is just because I kind of wanted to get like my feet wet. I wanted to figure out like what it was exactly, how things would work, and just kind of like try something new, engage in something that like I've never heard of, I've never really dealt with before. When I came to Discover Western is kind of when I heard about it, and it seemed really interesting. So just kind of like being in this atmosphere with people who have already been through college, who know what they're talking about, who know exactly like what things are going on. They helped out a lot with trying to like explain things to me a little differently and stuff, because like I've never really cared about different colors of dirt or the layers or like things like you can find and stuff, but like going through and like scraping like the tedious little tiny like scrapings that you kind of have to do like when you're looking at it and looking for those definitions in different lines is definitely something that like I pay attention to now and stuff, and it was really nice to just kind of like get brought into something different, to look at people and the way that people lived like long ago versus now is like completely different, and like to see kind of like how we can look at the past and figure out like what happened and how it influenced our future. I feel like that was really interesting, and that helped out a lot with this and stuff, figuring out like what types of like foods and stuff you could find that they had like used, as well as all the different holes and what the holes could possibly be used for. That was really interesting and stuff, and like how deep they went. Like some of them you were like, this is crazy how deep they go. It was kind of fun.
So anytime you dig a hole and you fill it back up, years later if somebody comes back, there's going to be a color difference between where you dug because you mixed everything up. So that allows us, once we dug down to the house floor, I mean that's what trash cans were. I mean you dig a hole in the floor of your house, you fill it up. When it's full or it's stinky, you cover it up, you dig a hole someplace else. So the hole she's talking about is actually where their waste would have been, which is all the good stuff. It's your broken arrowheads, it's stuff, pieces of pottery, shell, different kinds of interesting artifacts that will help us piece together what was going on in this house, what happened in this area. Had we found, in one of them a large amount of arrowheads, we would have wondered if maybe this is where they were made. If there was a lot of chipping and a lot of flaking, that would lead us to think, well, maybe when they lived here, something was going on within the society, that there was some warfare, something was happening. Or if it was ceremonial in aspect, that somebody who was very high up on within their hierarchy, who maybe had passed, and this was something that they were making in order to honor that person. Or even if it's just a place that was a point for trading. It's right from by the Illinois River. So it would be very easy to get up and down the river. Not like driving your car today, but easy for them comparative to walking places.
One thing I was going to say that you kind of hit on is that you're talking heavily on the past. I think one thing I wish I would have known going into this, it was great. It's the social aspect that you get from this field school is that you learn to communicate, you learn to work with others, you learn not just the technique, but how you're supposed to be to interact with your fellow field school members. Because sometimes you're
we essentially became a family.
Yes.
We lived together.
We did that too.
All of us, we shared a room with bunk beds, so we figured out everybody's own habits and stuff. Like, if you were more meticulous and neat and stuff, we definitely knew where you were at.
Or
if you
not.
were not, then you definitely, it was a kind of like a coping thing and stuff with everybody and stuff. So you definitely get to know everybody very personally, and eating habits, a lot of that stuff, snacking.
They threw me a birthday party.
We did. We made tacos. It was great.
I think the Institute of Wales, again, on the mountain, we saw each other hey, did you do this, that, or the other? Because we know their habits. They're not doing something might be wrong, or they just forgot. And that's kind of important.
Mm-hmm.
Are you drinking your water? Did you put your sunscreen on?
Did you reapply your sunscreen?
We just took care of each other. We became each other's parents.
Yeah, so
great.
you would notice if somebody was a little more sluggish, and then usually if they needed food or water. Water, was precious. It has never been precious for me before, because you carried it up there, and you wanted, Dr. Alveshere would have a couple blocks of ice that we would put into the cooler, and there is nothing better than some cold ice water when it's 100 degrees or so. I have an app called WT Forecast, and it told me we were in the 7th circle of hell, because it was so hot. We had phones that turned off because it was so hot up there.
You had a really nice tan, though. Let me tell you. That was the best tan I had ever had.
And shade was shade! Because even those really hot days, you were the sun, even with sunscreen, you could feel it baking you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So some days weren't sunny. They were rainy. And as a matter of fact, I think this is one of them because it looks like this is all wet here. The site got covered up before we left to try and help keep the moisture on there that we'd applied, because, again, water's precious. You're carrying it all up, so you want to use as little as possible. But if it did rain, it would help to prevent some of that wash away. So we would have to very carefully pick stuff up, the tarps up, and hold the water, either get buckets that we would use for screening, we would pour the water in there, or pick it up once it was light enough, pick it up and carry it off to the site and just dump it, and then lay the tarps out and hope that they dry.
And sometimes that rain, even though we would like the moisture, was actually too much moisture, so you had to be careful with the walls of the site that you dug. And even there were certain spots that were too wet where we couldn't even do work on until they were dry to a certain
You couldn't walk on it. You would walk, I mean, you would step in when you would pick up. There's like a layer of mud that you would take with you, and you don't know what's in there. You don't know what piece of shell or chips, you know, or flakes or a shard of pottery. Anything could be in there. Like, this is one of our pieces of pottery that we found. The rim, and then this would have been cord marking.
And that was a distinctive time period culture that's associated with. So that led us to know that there were Mossville period artifacts there, which is the early transition to Mississippians. That was exciting.
Because we found some, so there's grit tempered and there's shell tempered, and there are different time periods. And of course, anytime anything like pottery changes, there's an overlap, and that's what we had was overlap for us, because we found some that was grit tempered pottery and we found some that was the shell tempered pottery, which is exciting to get artifacts that are in that transition period, and it helps really narrow down the timeline of when this home would have been lived in. So, and here is the piece that we found, and then here's an example in a book that it's the Mossville. And then here, it was really neat to find some of these, and it was just surprising to have a piece of pottery from approximately 1,000 years ago that's got this bend to it, that we didn't break it, that it was still there, that we were able to dig this out and retain it. And then, of course, we have, that's the ochre. So the red ochre would have been used in coloring the pottery, potentially coloring, for painting on themselves for war practice or ritual practices of some kind.
And that piece had, I mean, it's like a soft piece of stone, and then you rub it and you get this pigment on you. But that piece actually had the pigment. I mean, you could see where somebody, you know, 700 to 1,000 years ago had been rubbing their finger in there, making a little paint pot, because you could still see the depression of where the rubbing had happened, which is really cool.
And I know for you guys it's probably a little hard to see, but this is our frog, our toad, that liked our site a whole lot.
Like every daytime it rained, we had to, without fail, there is a toad there, and we have to pick up the toad and place him elsewhere.
Sometimes too.
Sometimes too.
And then we had mice too.
Yeah. We had like 3.
Yeah.
Bruno, Gus, Gus, and Mars.
Yes.
They built nests.
They stole toilet paper.
They did.
They did.
They stole a lot of stuff from us, but it was great. We got to see it all over again.
So, and part of the process isn't just, I mean, you don't just go in with a shovel and take big chunks out. It's very meticulous. Lots of documentation. Everything that's found, you mark everything. The corners of the house we had marked, and the lines we would actually measure from line to the artifact, from line to the artifact, and then from the line down. So we knew exactly where, three-dimensionally, each artifact we found that was something that was large, not something that was small that, you know, was in the 5 gallons of things that we would, you know, have to sift through, but large, you know, arrowheads that were into the wall that, of course, we wonder why. Did somebody drop it?
Well, it's more about this site too, is remember Dr. Alveshere talking about this, is that everything that you find on where we're at is important, because everything that is up there, because that just as we had to bring all of our material up, they had to bring all their material up, so everything, including, it seems insignificant, rocks, those are important, because they had to have been brought there at some point.
And even if they left, where, you know, did they leave it all behind because they, you know, sometimes would leave and, you know, could they not carry it all?
And the site there is actually huge. I mean, we dug one house. That's it. And it was settlement.
We were on what's called Settlement A, which is what we think is from the earliest time period. It's closest to the burial mounds and the religious area. but we were. It's the settlement area where the residences or the houses would have been, and then just across the fence from us is an area that's thought to have been Settlement B. It seems like over time that for whatever reason they sort of expanded out or moved their settlement a little bit westward on the bluff. Southwest is the direction along the river. And so they seem to, over time, maybe the next generation kind of built their houses a little ways farther over. And Settlement B's never been excavated before. We actually didn't have access to it until we just met a new landowner while we were out there digging in 2017. And so he gave us permission to dig Settlement B, which is the one that we haven't, we don't know what exactly the houses were like or that time period was like on the site. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on this summer, which is exciting. And then back in the 1970s, there were two other settlements that are farther to the west, just across the field. Well, if we have time, we can look at a video that you can get a sense of the space of it. But those ones at settlement C and D, those were destroyed by a mining company that wanted to mine coal. And so in the 1970s, they were a bunch of archaeologists from here, from WIU and surrounding areas, came together to try to excavate as much as they could of those villages before the coal company wiped them away. And it turned out that they were extensive villages with hundreds of houses, and each of them had been destroyed by fire at one point with everything left in place, and then the next village rebuilt nearby but not right on the same spot. And so both of those had just all kinds of artifacts right on the surface of the houses. The house floors just left where people had fled because the house is burned. So we don't know if Settlement B is going to be like that too or not. But the house that we excavated in 2017, it looks like people for the most part packed up and left. They didn't leave everything on the surface like those ones that were in the other settlements.
And we found seeds, we found shells, so we think, of course we don't know, but the shell would have probably been used for making that shell tempered pottery. The seeds, we have not determined yet where they're from or what plant they go to.
Oh, no, those are
Are they?
Those are Chenopodium seeds.
Okay.
They're kind of like quinoa, but they're native to this area, and they're very commonly used. It's a grass that still grows around here, but they were cultivated so that their grains are bigger than the wild ones we see today. And yeah, those were charred, so they fell near a fire somewhere, and they got charred, and that preserved them. They didn't burn all up.
So food.
Yeah.
And then we had a mystery pile of rocks, and I don't know how well you guys can see it, but it's actually, there's a grid, and each rock was sketched in of the exact location. And when they were removed, they were numbered, and so you can look at that. You can go to the bag that has that particular rock in it, and you can match up which one was where and where they were, if there was another layer underneath that.
You want to mention why the edges look like that?
So, this is not because somebody was like messing around with the paper. This is grasshoppers. They ate up the edge of the paper. And they went after the string that we had, that you saw. We would catch them sitting on that too, and we would have to shoot them off. But yeah, they really got into eating that paper. We were a great source of food for them. And this is the site. I mean, how big it is, so you can kind of see.
That one structure.
Yeah, this is just one house, and then over by Savannah, you can see kind of some piles there. That's what we moved. That has all been sifted. And then at the end of the day,
This is the end of the season.
this is towards the end of the field school. So if you noticed at the beginning, it looked like the
dirt
Dust Bowl.
and rocky.
So this is towards the end of the field school where the plants and vegetation have come back. There were wild raspberries on the side of the paths. So
We had those
yeah, I
friends.
snacked on them.
So just watching, like, I don't know, I may not be the phrase, but just watching nature claim this land back. While we were there, like we're going one day, it rains, we're like, muddy as all get out. We come back next day, sprout, and like it was like the first couple weeks were interesting, crossing a very plowed field. It was rough on the ankles, but once this came back in, and it kind of pulled the soil back together. It was like we left distinctive paths.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We had to like stomp on them and make sure that they like flattened out, so we had our path, so it's easier to walk past. Just trying to like get all over like those like, because they were like essentially solid pieces of dirt that we had to like walk over that first couple days before we got our path back.
And you can kind of see some of the mounds, the different ones that were up here. And again, this is towards the path out, and as you can see, we've walked the same path so much that it's actually left.
The gnome.
And yeah, so here's Linda C with the gnome that we had. On the days that we weren't actually up at the site, we were taking care of all the artifacts that we had.
Some of them were really frail. Some of them we tried to wash them, but we eventually just said they're just too frail to wash. And we just
sometimes like we discovered dirt from artifacts when we put it in the water, and suddenly we didn't pull one back out.
The shells were disintegrating, and we're like, yeah, we're not gonna wash them, or we're gonna brush stuff.
And so in the lab, you use a lot of tools that you wouldn't normally associate, or think to use with on like a field school, like toothbrushes. We use strainers. We have tubs.
Like what you would screen spaghetti.
Or how's your household junk?
Yeah.
It's useful junk, but it's,
And then after the artifacts are cleaned, they're separated by what they are, what type they are. And every bag gets, so as you collect the artifacts on the dig site, they go in a brown paper bag that annotates the day, the site, and the location. So there was 8 of us, so we were 2 groups of 4, and we each did a total of half the house. We did it in quarters. Me and Linda C we were on one group, and then Lexi and Savannah were in the other group. So, and you can kind of see like the numbering. So when we got to the part where we were going to clean everything, we actually have a log, and everything is cataloged. So 50 years down the road, somebody wants to look at something, they're able to look at our record and see, okay, well, this bag had this stuff in it. Okay, well, this is the number it was given, so this is what's in there, and you can come back and see the different things, whether it was pottery or wood, whether it was flakes or an arrowhead. It will all be separated and sorted out based off of what it was.
Also, the pieces that like you can identify as they're arrowheads, or they're just pieces of pottery that are have very identifying markings on them. They got their own bag, and we're
separated from everything else. So like the arrowhead that was in the wall that you saw earlier, that would have had it would have been the only thing in that bag, because we have exactly where that was at. Now, some of the little pieces that were found, or small arrowheads that were found that had been with the shovel scrapings, that we don't necessarily know it was exactly right here in the house, but we know it was in this quarter at this level, then that's how it would be separated out. So at different levels, we would shovel scrape, and it would go into a big Ziploc bag. And then afterwards, we would actually do a float test. So you separate different things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily have caught before. So like the seeds, it wouldn't necessarily have caught those seeds because they're so small they would have went through the screen when we were screening everything. But we were able to find stuff like that when we went through this process, which is a little muddy and kind of fun if you like to play in muddy water, where your hand goes in there and swirls it all around and mixes it up real good. And so you dissolve the mud, the stuff that you don't really want. You'll have seeds that will float from the top because they're lighter. You'll have more dense artifacts will settle down on the bottom. So you'll actually be able to get both of those from this one bag of stuff. So Dr. Alveshere had a drone, so we were able to get an actual vertical picture. And we're all standing over here so you can see how little we are in comparison to how big the house was. And it's a little difficult to see this, but you can actually, right here would have been where the fire pit is. This dark line, which you can kind of see through here, would have been where the walls would have been dug. So they would have dug channels, they would have put in posts, they would have backfilled it, which again is that you dig that hole, you turn everything around, which is going to give you different colorations. There's a pile of rocks that we had, and all of this, and it even comes over here, is what we had dug out, sifted, and moved. It was easily some parts 5 foot tall.
And there was trial and error with the drone.
Yeah, we had fun with the drone.
The center of the house is where the drone is. Right now it's looking down. Straight down. So here it goes. You can see its little propellers. You want to just flip the lights up. Alright, so here we go, up, 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 looking down. You can see the outline of the wall trenches of the house. And then there's a big hearth in here that's actually like 2 different fire pits over time. And there's the crew and our tents. And there's the Illinois River. Oh god, yeah. We're gonna go up a little bit higher, so we'll go around once. So this is we have an area where we would eat lunch in the shade over there, and the potty was the porta potty done. And the trees. So all that was what we would have crossed, and then we'll just we were experimenting going around. We'll go up a little bit higher, and then we can look at the other. And there's the site right there. There's the break area, and then on the other side of those trees. Okay, so then this over here, this whole area here is what's called Settlement B. And this was never threatened by the mining companies, so it was never excavated during the big excavations in the 70s. And then the landowner after that in the 70s, well, the company that owned the land was not friendly to archaeologists after that. So it didn't get excavated, but we know that there were a bunch of houses here because they could tell from walking over the surface when it was plowed that there was evidence just like there was in those other settlements. This is settlement C, this area here, and then this area beyond is the settlement D area, and both of those were the ones that were destroyed for the coal company. So we'll go back to looking at, yes, there's our dirt that we removed from the square.
So that's the whole, all that stuff to the right there is everything we dug. And it's surprising to look back on it at how much it is, but at the time when I know, at least for me, when I was doing it, it didn't seem like that much. And it was like one day it was there, and then the next day I'm like, where did all this come from?
This field was actually not completely level. Behind the tent, there were actually eventually sloped down into the tree line.
Yeah. Didn't lose a tarp one time to the trees. Blew away.
Oh, you got it again.
Yeah.
But we're like, it's not where it's supposed to be.
This is looking the opposite direction, away from Settlement B. Now we have this here, it was the platform mound, and then over here it was a really large burial mound that had hundreds of burials in it. They excavated a quarter of it before the Nagpur law went into place in the 70s and 80s. And they found like hundreds, like over almost 300 skeletons, I think, just in that quarter. So people were burying their dead there. This portion of the site was a very sacred spot. There are at least 10 mounds there that were burial or ceremonial mounds. And so what we were excavating was the village that was adjacent to that, and it seems like they moved their village farther and farther away or expanded out over time.
And you can see when she's got it paused, our tracks of where we went. So you've got tracks here, with our bathrooms over here, and and then our track that goes all the way through here. Back of how we traveled back down the hill.
And not all of us are very tall in this field school. So when the grass like grew and took over, some of it was like here, and it was like it kind of gave you that, you know, that fantasy of the Jurassic Park moment.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting about when you get a bird's eye view like this is you can more finally see the human impact, the impact we had doing this.
Oh yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard when you're on the ground because you're just, or when you're in the moment because you're like so focused on one thing.
It's that reflection back, or that, you know, or that reflection even in the future, you know.
Yeah. That was our first day that we really had to draw. But it was, we tried to do it again later, and it was windier later, so it was harder. We couldn't keep it up and put it up as high. But we'll be using it a lot in the summer. Does anybody have questions for us?
What was the rock? What was the name of the rock that you said it was like painting that they used to paint? What was the name of it?
So that was red ochre, is what was actually on that. Yeah. Spelled either O-C-H-R-E or O-C-H-E-R, depending on who you ask.
I have some tips. Bring a pair of good treaded shoes to even walk up, because on the days that there was a lot of moisture, your tennis shoes were not going to necessarily do the job well.
I can say the boots I'm currently wearing, I recently bought a new pair of boots because these have officially died. And I took them up with me to the field school, and I do believe, because I had these boots for a better part of 10 years, I do think the field school did a number on them on their lifespan. So, like, you're but they are totally worth my boots. I am, on some days, especially when, like, muddy or, like, it's just hot, I brought up a pair of tennis shoes as well. They were lightweight. I wore my boots up, and with both those, it was it made it tolerable to work.
I have to agree, because I've been wearing mine, especially this winter with all the snow and the ice and everything, just because it had just more tread on my shoes, and you know, it's more stabilizing the shoes themselves. So even if you have to go out and buy a brand new pair of shoes for this just school alone, they'll still are great for other things.
It's worth it.
Any other questions?
So like I was reading about the trip. So it also talks about Rice Lake Terrace. Is that's below the bluff, right?
Yeah, that's just down below. And we ended up with the house that we excavated. We ended up only getting down to actually do some core samples on the last day down there. But that's an area that's known to have, you know, it was known by artifact collectors for 100 years probably, and it's an area that's known to have had a lot of great archaeological remains, and those date all the way from the early Archaic period, so about 10,000 years ago, all the way up. Every period is represented all the way through the Mississippi, and so people would have been living there or stopping there. You know, people still it's right next to a campground and a wildlife area for hunting, you know, where people go to hunt and fish, yeah, even every year, you know, now. So it's just, you know, you can imagine it's always been a really great place to go and get food. And so that, you know, undoubtedly during the period that Orndorff was occupied up on top of the bluff, I'm sure that was an extension of, you know, they'd be down there when things were safe, and if you needed to, if they were under some kind of threat, then you had this really great sort of fortress that you could retreat to. But I'm sure that was, you know, their front yard. And so we're excited to do more work down there too, and that's the plan, is to try to divide up the time a little more to do more work down there and see, you know, what would they have been doing and what all time periods are reflected in the different survey work to do some testing here and there and try to get a sense for what the use pattern was like down in the bottom part as well. Any questions?
That's all I like.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming.
When is the deadline for signing up?
Signing up by March 1st, and so there's a $100 deposit to put down by then, and then that would go toward the rest of the fees. It's just to make sure that people are not just filling out a form, but actually committed to planning on going. So.
And where is the form?
The form is on the website, and so if you go to the anthropology, it's www.wiu.com/CAS for College of Arts and Sciences /anthropology/field school.
But we can put a link on that.
Yeah, there's a link on the Facebook page, and there's if you just go to the anthropology page, you can find the field school too. So, but there's a PDF file that you just print out and fill out, and it's in my mailbox or mailed to me here in the area.
It's kind of like this.
Exactly like that, and somebody's filling one out. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yay.
Please, if I have a chance to do it again, I'm doing it again.
So yeah, so it's filling up, but we still have spaces available. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming, guys. Any questions online? Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. Hi, Terry.
Bye.